There's a reason why some people never seem to struggle. They know something you don't. And after 2,500 years, Buddhist monks are finally ready to share it. Welcome to Echoes of Dharma. Right now, there are people walking among us who have cracked an invisible code. They wake up peaceful even when chaos surrounds them. Help appears exactly when they need it most. They make decisions that seem crazy but always work out perfectly. You've met these people. Maybe it's that coworker who stays calm during every crisis, or that neighbor who somehow always has exactly what they need. What's their secret? It's called good karma, but not the way you think. Most people believe karma is about the universe keeping score. Do good things, get good things back, but that's completely wrong. Here's what 25 centuries of Buddhist wisdom has actually discovered. Every thought you think, every word you speak, every action you take creates an invisible energy around you. This energy is constantly attracting or repelling everything in your life. Your relationships, your opportunities, even whether you feel peaceful when you're alone. The ancient masters knew this. They discovered 10 specific experiences that only happen to people whose energy is completely clean. 10 gifts that come not from luck or privilege, but from understanding how reality actually works. Think about your own life right now. When you're completely alone, do you feel peaceful or anxious? When problems arise, does help appear, or do you face everything alone? Your answers reveal exactly where your karma stands. Over the next hour, I'm going to show you these 10 unmistakable signs. Some of you already have a few, but never understood why. Others will finally see what's been blocking the life you deserve, but I warn you, once you understand these secrets, you can't unknow them. You'll see the invisible threads connecting every action to every result. And most importantly, you'll know exactly how to cultivate good karma yourself. The first secret might shock you because it has nothing to do with other people. It's about something most people actually fear. In the mountains of ancient China, there lived a monk named Wei Ming who had spent 30 years serving others with complete devotion. He tended to the sick, fed the hungry, and never once spoke harshly to anyone, even when they treated him poorly. One terrible winter, bandits attacked his monastery. They burned everything, scattered the monks, and left Wei Ming with nothing but his torn robes and an empty begging bowl. As snow began to fall, Wei Ming found himself completely alone in the wilderness. No shelter, no food, no warm clothes. Most people would have despaired, cursed their fate, or wondered why such terrible things happened to good people. But as Wei Ming sat beneath a withered tree that night, something extraordinary happened. A gentle smile spread across his face. Not because he was happy about losing everything, but because for the first time in years, he was completely alone with himself. And what he found there was pure peace. When morning came, a traveling merchant discovered Wei Ming still sitting in meditation, so serene that birds had made nests in the folds of his robes during the night. The merchant was amazed. Here was a man who had lost everything, yet radiated such profound tranquility that even wild animals felt safe in his presence. The merchant asked, "Master, you have nothing left. How can you be so calm?" Wei Ming opened his eyes and said something that reveals the first secret of good karma. "I have lost nothing that was truly mine, but I have discovered something precious. When you have lived with a clean heart, your own company becomes a sanctuary, not a prison. This is the first gift that only people with good karma experience. Effortless peace in solitude. Think about this carefully. When was the last time you were completely alone and felt genuinely peaceful? Not distracted by your phone, not busy with tasks, just alone with your thoughts and feelings. Most people fear this kind of solitude because it forces them to face themselves, and what they find there isn't peaceful at all. It's a storm of regrets, worries, guilt about past actions, and anxiety about future consequences. Their minds become torture chambers when there's nothing to distract them. But people with good karma have a completely different experience. When they're alone, they feel like they're coming home. There's no internal noise, no mental chaos, no desperate need for distraction. Their past actions don't haunt them because they have nothing to hide from themselves. The Zen masters understood this phenomenon perfectly. They taught that solitude is the ultimate test of your karma. If being alone feels like punishment, it's because your inner world is cluttered with the debris of harmful actions. Every lie you've told, every person you've hurt, every selfish choice you've made creates noise in your consciousness. But when your actions have been pure, when you've lived with genuine kindness and honesty, that noise disappears. Your mind becomes like a still mountain lake, perfectly clear and peaceful. You don't need music, television, social media, or constant busyness to feel okay. Your own presence becomes enough. Now pause and honestly examine your own relationship with solitude. Do you seek it out or avoid it? When you're driving alone, do you immediately turn on music, or can you enjoy the silence? When you wake up in the middle of the night, are your thoughts peaceful, or do they spiral into worry and regret? This isn't about being antisocial or avoiding relationships. People with good karma often have rich, meaningful connections with others, but they don't need these connections to feel complete. They don't use relationships to escape from themselves or fill an inner void. Instead, they bring their inner peace into every interaction. They listen deeply because they're not internally arguing with their own thoughts. They respond from wisdom rather than reacting from old wounds. Their presence becomes a gift to others because they've learned to be truly present with themselves. The Buddha taught that this kind of inner peace isn't a luxury or a personality trait. It's the natural result of living with right intention. When your actions align with your deepest values, when you speak truthfully even when lies would be easier, when you treat others with genuine kindness regardless of how they treat you, you create what the masters called a clean conscience. And a clean conscience creates an inner sanctuary that no external circumstance can destroy. Bandits can burn your monastery, economic collapse can take your possessions, relationships can end, but nobody can touch the peace you've built through righteous living. But here's what makes this even more remarkable. This inner peace doesn't just affect you when you're alone. It creates an invisible magnetic field around you that draws something most people spend their entire lives desperately searching for. During the Tang dynasty, a young monk named Liang was making a pilgrimage to study at the famous Shaolin Temple. The journey required crossing treacherous mountain passes and would take him 3 weeks on foot. Halfway through his travels, as autumn turned to harsh winter, Liang discovered an elderly woman collapsed beside the frozen path. She was clearly dying from hunger and cold. Her lips were blue, her breathing shallow, and she could barely speak. Liang carried only enough food and water to sustain himself for the remaining journey to Shaolin. He faced an impossible choice: share his supplies and risk dying himself in the mountains, or continue on and let this stranger perish. Without hesitation, Liang gave the woman all his food and water. He wrapped her in his only warm cloak and stayed with her through the night, sharing his body heat to keep her alive. By morning, she had recovered enough to reach a nearby village, but Liang now faced the remaining week of travel with nothing. He arrived at Shaolin Week, hungry, and 3 days past the strict deadline for new students. The temple master was legendary for his iron discipline. Anyone arriving late was turned away without exception, no matter their reason or circumstances. But as Liang approached the monastery gates, preparing to accept his fate, he saw a familiar figure waiting for him. The elderly woman he had saved stood beside the temple master. She wasn't a dying traveler at all. She was Master Chen, the most revered teacher in all of China and the spiritual mother of Shaolin itself. She had been testing the character of incoming students for decades, disguising herself as someone in desperate need. Not only was Liang welcomed with highest honors, but Master Chen personally took him as her disciple. The help he had given freely on that frozen mountain path returned to him multiplied beyond anything he could have imagined. This ancient story reveals the second profound gift of good karma. Help appears from nowhere, precisely when you need it most. But understanding why this happens requires grasping something most people completely miss about the nature of reality. In Buddhist teaching, there's a concept called the web of compassion. Every act of kindness you perform sends invisible ripples through this web, connecting you to sources of help you cannot even see yet. When you assist someone in their moment of need, you don't just solve their immediate problem. You demonstrate what compassion looks like, and they carry that example forward into every interaction for the rest of their lives. Think about the last time someone helped you when you desperately needed it. How did it change you? Did you become more likely to help others? Did it restore your faith in human goodness? That person didn't just give you practical assistance. They planted a seed of compassion in your heart that will sprout into countless acts of kindness you'll perform for others. This is how the web works. The businessman who helps a stranded motorist might be helping the same person who will one day save his daughter from drowning. The nurse who stays late to comfort a dying patient might be caring for the grandmother of the doctor who will one day discover the cure for her own illness. But here's what makes this phenomenon so remarkable. The help that returns isn't random or coincidental. It's precisely calibrated to what you need, delivered through the exact people who can provide it, arriving at the perfect moment when you need it most. I've studied countless stories from Buddhist texts where this pattern repeats. A monk shares his last grain of rice with a hungry child. Decades later, when that monk is old and forgotten, a wealthy merchant appears at his door with a lifetime of provisions. That merchant is the same child, now grown, who never forgot the kindness that saved his life. A nun tends to a diseased beggar that everyone else avoided. Years later, when she faces her own serious illness, a renowned physician travels great distances to treat her without charge. The physician's grandfather was that beggar, and the story of her compassion had been passed down through his family for generations. But there's something even deeper happening here. When you help others without expecting anything in return, you're not just performing good deeds. You're proving to the universe that you can be trusted with abundance. You're demonstrating that when you have resources, you use them wisely and generously. The universe responds by ensuring you're never truly without resources when you need them most. Not because some cosmic entity is keeping score, but because you've become the kind of person that other good people naturally want to help. Yet there's an even more mysterious gift that good karma provides. Something that protects you from dangers you never even see coming. In ancient Japan, there lived a Zen master named Hakuin who was renowned throughout the land for his wisdom and compassion. One spring morning, he set out to visit a distant temple where he had been invited to teach. As he approached a mountain crossroads, he faced a choice that would save his life in ways he couldn't possibly imagine. Two paths lay before him. The first was wide, well-maintained, and heavily traveled. Every villager he had met along the way recommended this route. It was faster, safer, and led directly to his destination. The second path was narrow, winding, and treacherous, snaking through dangerous mountain terrain that most people avoided entirely. All logic pointed to taking the popular route. His traveling companions urged him to choose the obvious path. But as Hakuin stood at that crossroads, something deep within him whispered otherwise. He felt a strange pull toward the dangerous mountain trail, an inexplicable knowing that defied all rational explanation. Despite the protests of those with him, Hakuin chose the narrow, perilous path. His companions thought he had lost his mind. Why would a wise master choose obvious hardship over an easier journey? Some refused to follow him and took the safe route instead. 3 days later, devastating news reached them. A massive earthquake had triggered landslides that completely destroyed the main road exactly at the time their group would have been passing through. Everyone who had taken the popular path was killed instantly. Hakuin's seemingly foolish choice had saved not only his own life, but the lives of those who trusted his judgment enough to follow him. When asked how he knew to avoid the danger, Hakuin simply replied, "When your mind is like a still mountain lake, you can see clearly to the bottom." The truth was always there. I simply learned how to listen to the whisper beneath the noise. This reveals the third extraordinary gift that only people with good karma possess: an inner compass that guides them unerringly toward truth and away from danger. But this isn't supernatural ability or divine intervention. It's what happens when your karma becomes so clean that your mind transforms into a perfectly tuned instrument of perception. The Zen masters understood that guilt, regret, and the chaos of harmful actions create tremendous noise in your consciousness. Imagine trying to hear a whisper in the middle of a thunderstorm. When your inner world is filled with the turbulence of past mistakes, lies you've told, people you've hurt, or selfish choices you've made, it becomes impossible to hear the subtle guidance that reality is constantly offering. But when your actions are pure, when your intentions are clean, when you've lived with genuine integrity, that noise disappears entirely. In the resulting silence, you can hear what the ancient masters called the voice of the Dharma, the universe's way of guiding those who have earned the right to be guided. This inner knowing isn't limited to avoiding physical danger. People with good karma develop an almost supernatural ability to sense which relationships will nurture them and which will drain them, which opportunities are genuine and which are traps, which words to speak and which to keep silent. Think about the times in your life when you followed your gut instinct against all logical advice, and it turned out perfectly. Or conversely, remember the times when everything seemed logical and right, but something inside you felt uneasy, and you later discovered you were walking into a trap. That feeling, that inner knowing, becomes remarkably reliable when your karma is clean. Modern psychology has begun to understand this phenomenon. When you're not constantly defending past mistakes or hiding from the consequences of harmful actions, your brain can process subtle information much more clearly. You notice micro-expressions in people's faces that reveal their true intentions. You pick up on inconsistencies in what people say. You sense the energy in rooms before anyone speaks. But perhaps most importantly, you trust this inner voice because it has never led you astray. When your karma is good, your intuition becomes your most reliable guide through life's endless complexities. This isn't about becoming psychic or developing magical powers. It's about removing the interference that prevents you from accessing the wisdom that was always there. When your conscience is clear, when your heart is pure, when your actions align with your deepest values, you naturally become more sensitive to the subtle currents of truth that flow through every situation. The Buddha taught that this clarity of perception is one of the natural results of right living. When you stop creating chaos through harmful actions, you can finally perceive the underlying order that governs all things. But this remarkable gift of discernment reveals something even more beautiful about the nature of good karma. It completely transforms how you navigate life's inevitable changes and endings. In ancient Tibet, there lived a revered teacher named Tenzin who had spent 40 years building the most beautiful monastery in the region. Students came from across Asia to study under him, and the monastery became known as a place where enlightenment itself seemed to dwell within its walls. Tenzin poured his heart and soul into every stone, every garden, every teaching hall. One terrible spring, an avalanche roared down the mountain and destroyed everything. In minutes, 4 decades of careful construction was reduced to rubble. His life's work vanished before his eyes. The younger monks wailed in despair, unable to comprehend how such devastation could befall their sacred home. But Tenzin surprised everyone. Instead of mourning, he walked calmly through the ruins, picked up a small stone, and sat down in what had once been the meditation hall. With that single stone, he began building again. When his students asked how he could remain so peaceful after losing everything, Tenzin smiled and said something that reveals the 4th secret of good karma. He said, "A river never mourns the rocks it flows around. It simply finds a new path and continues toward the ocean." This monastery was never mine to keep. It was mine to build, mine to love, and now mine to release. The avalanche has not taken anything from me. It has given me the gift of beginning again with all the wisdom I gained the first time. Within 5 years, Tenzin had built an even more magnificent monastery. But more importantly, his graceful response to loss had inspired hundreds of students who witnessed something they had never seen before. A human being who could face devastating loss without bitterness, without clinging, without demanding that life be different than it was. This is the fourth profound gift that only people with good karma experience. They navigate endings with such grace that those endings naturally transform into beautiful beginnings. But understanding this requires grasping something most people never learn about the true nature of attachment. Most people confuse love with clinging. They think holding tight to things, people, and situations is a sign of devotion. But the Buddhist masters understood that true love always includes the wisdom to let go when the time comes. When you cling to what is naturally ending, you create suffering for yourself and block the space needed for something new to enter your life. Think about the most difficult endings you've experienced. A relationship that ended, a job you lost, a dream that didn't work out. How did you respond? Did you fight the ending with bitterness and resentment? Did you spend months or years trying to force life to return to the way it was? Or were you somehow able to find peace with the change and trust that something better was coming? People with good karma have learned something that transforms their entire relationship with impermanence. They understand that everything in life has seasons. Just as trees don't fight the autumn wind when it's time to release their leaves, wise people don't resist when life signals that a chapter is ending. This doesn't mean they're passive or that they don't care deeply. A tree loves its leaves, nourishes them, depends on them for survival. But when winter approaches, the tree releases them completely, trusting that spring will bring new growth. This is love without attachment, care without clinging. The Zen masters taught that clinging to what is ending is like trying to stop a river by standing in its path. You don't stop the river, you only exhaust yourself fighting the inevitable. But when you flow with the current of change, you discover that every ending contains the seeds of a new beginning. Here's what makes this so remarkable. When you release endings gracefully, without bitterness or resistance, you free up tremendous energy that was being wasted on fighting reality. That energy becomes available for creating something new. More importantly, your graceful response to loss inspires others and creates goodwill that comes back to support your fresh starts. I've seen this pattern countless times in the Buddhist texts. A master loses his temple but responds with such equanimity that wealthy patrons volunteer to build him an even better one. A nun's monastery burns down, but her peaceful acceptance of the loss moves an entire community to help her rebuild. A monk loses all his possessions, but handles the loss so gracefully that he gains something far more valuable: the deep respect and support of everyone who witnessed his response. But there's something even deeper at work here. When your karma is clean, you develop an unshakable trust that whatever endings you face are somehow serving your highest good, even when you can't see how. This trust creates something most people never experience. In the mountains of ancient Korea, there lived a Buddhist farmer named Wonhyo who had spent his entire life cultivating both his land and his spiritual practice with equal devotion. For 30 years, his rice terraces had fed not only his family, but also the nearby monastery and countless traveling pilgrims who passed through the valley. His harvest was legendary throughout the region for its abundance and quality. One catastrophic summer, a massive wildfire swept through the mountains. Wonhyo watched helplessly as flames consumed everything he had built: his rice fields, his irrigation systems, his storage buildings, even his humble farmhouse, all reduced to ash and smoke. Neighbors from distant valleys came to offer their condolences, expecting to find him devastated. Instead, they discovered Wonhyo sitting peacefully in the center of his burned fields, hands folded in meditation. When they expressed their sorrow for his terrible loss, he opened his eyes and said something that stunned everyone present. He smiled gently and replied, "The fire has taken what it needed to take. Now we shall see what gifts it has left behind." The other farmers thought grief had driven him mad. How could anyone find gifts in such complete destruction? But Wonhyo had learned something that only people with profound good karma ever discover. He trusted life completely, even in its most devastating moments. The following spring revealed the wisdom of his trust. The ash from the fire had created the richest soil anyone had ever seen. His first harvest after the fire produced more rice than he had ever grown before. More remarkably, the cleared land revealed underground springs that allowed him to expand his farming far beyond what had been possible previously. Within 3 years, his farm was feeding 3 times as many people as before the fire. But the true miracle wasn't the abundant harvest. It was Wonhyo's response to disaster. His complete trust in life's process, even when he couldn't see the outcome, had allowed him to remain peaceful and productive when others would have been consumed by despair. This trust became legendary throughout Korea, inspiring generations of farmers to face their own hardships with similar faith. This reveals the 5th extraordinary gift that only people with good karma possess: unshakable trust in life, even during chaos, even when everything seems to be falling apart, even when they can't understand why difficult things are happening to them. But this isn't blind faith or naive optimism. People with good karma don't trust life because they believe nothing bad will ever happen to them. They trust life because they understand something profound about the nature of reality itself. They know that when your actions have been pure, when your intentions have been clean, when you've lived with genuine integrity, then whatever happens to you is somehow serving your highest good, even if you can't see how in the moment. Think about this carefully. The farmer trusted the fire not because he wanted his fields to burn, but because his entire life of righteous living had proven to him that life's apparent disasters often contain hidden blessings. His karma was so clean that he could trust the process even when the process looked destructive. This kind of trust is earned, not given. Every time you choose honesty over deception, kindness over cruelty, generosity over selfishness, you build evidence that the universe can be trusted. When you consistently act from your highest values, life consistently responds in ways that reinforce your faith in its basic goodness. The Buddha taught that this trust is one of the most precious fruits of right living. When you know in your bones that your actions have been pure, you can face any circumstance without the additional suffering of believing that life is against you. You might not understand why difficulties arise, but you don't waste energy fighting reality or drowning in self-pity. People with good karma understand that trust and control are opposites. The more you try to control every outcome, the less you're able to trust the process. But when you focus on controlling only what is truly within your power, your actions and responses, you become free to trust life with everything else. This doesn't mean becoming passive or accepting injustice. One Hyo worked diligently to rebuild after the fire, but he worked from trust rather than fear, from faith rather than desperation. This completely changed the energy he brought to his efforts and the results he achieved. Modern psychology confirms what the ancient masters knew. When you approach challenges from a foundation of trust rather than fear, your brain functions more clearly, you see opportunities that others miss, and you inspire confidence in those around you. But perhaps most importantly, this unshakable trust creates the inner freedom to make choices that others find incomprehensible. People with good karma can let go of what doesn't serve them, even when holding on seems safer. In ancient China, there lived a Zen master named Yunmen who had devoted his life to training young monks in the ways of enlightenment. For 20 years, he poured his wisdom, patience, and unconditional love into each student who came to his monastery. He watched them grow from confused seekers into wise teachers, celebrating each breakthrough as if it were his own awakening. One by one, as his students matured, they began leaving to establish their own monasteries and spread the teachings throughout the land. Some left to teach in distant provinces. Others were called to serve royal courts. A few even traveled to foreign lands to share the Dharma with people who had never heard Buddhist teachings. The younger monks who remained expected Master Yunmen to be heartbroken as his beloved students departed. They couldn't understand how someone could invest so much love and energy into relationships only to watch them dissolve. Some even suggested that he should ask his best students to stay, to remain loyal to the teacher who had given them everything. But Yunmen surprised everyone with his response. Each time a student announced their departure, he blessed them with genuine joy. He helped them prepare for their journeys, gave them his most treasured teaching texts, and sent them off with celebrations rather than sadness. When asked why he didn't feel abandoned or betrayed, Yunmen offered a teaching that reveals the sixth secret of good karma. He said, "A tree does not weep when its fruit ripens and falls to nourish new ground. The purpose of the tree is not to hoard its fruit, but to offer it freely when the time is right." My students were never mine to keep. They were mine to love, mine to teach, and mine to release when they were ready to fulfill their own destinies. Trying to hold what is meant to flow would only poison the love that created it. Years later, Yunmen's reputation for this wise detachment spread throughout Asia. Students came from everywhere specifically because they knew he would love them completely without trying to possess them. His monastery became more influential than any other precisely because he never grasped for influence. His teachings spread farther than anyone else's because he never demanded that people stay to hear them. This is the sixth profound gift that only people with good karma experience: effortless detachment from what doesn't belong to them. But understanding this requires distinguishing between detachment and indifference, between letting go and giving up. People with good karma love deeply, but they love without the poison of possession. They invest fully in relationships, opportunities, and dreams, but they hold these investments lightly, ready to release them when life indicates it's time for change. This isn't coldness or lack of care. It's the highest form of love, love that includes the wisdom to know when holding on becomes harmful. Think about the relationships and situations in your own life right now? Are there people you're trying to control or change? Opportunities you're chasing despite clear signs they're not meant for you? Dreams you're clinging to even though they're causing you constant frustration? Your answers reveal how clean your karma is in this area. The Buddhist masters understood something that most people never learn. When you grasp tightly to what is trying to leave your life, you create suffering for yourself and often for others as well. A relationship that becomes possessive turns toxic. A career you cling to despite obvious mismatch becomes a prison. A dream pursued beyond its natural season becomes a nightmare. But when you hold things lightly, when you love without grasping, something magical happens. People feel safe around you because they know you won't try to own them. Opportunities flow to you more easily because you're not desperately chasing them. Dreams manifest more naturally because you're not strangling them with anxious attachment. This detachment isn't something you force or pretend. It grows naturally from the deep security that comes with good karma. When you know that your actions have been pure, when you trust that life will provide what you truly need, you can afford to release what doesn't serve you. You're not operating from scarcity or fear of loss. The ancient texts are filled with stories of masters who gained everything by grasping nothing. Teachers whose influence grew because they never demanded followers. Healers whose power increased because they never insisted on payment. Leaders whose authority expanded because they never fought for control. There's profound wisdom in recognizing what belongs in your life and what doesn't. Good karma gives you the clarity to see these distinctions and the courage to act on them. You stop wasting energy on relationships that drain you, opportunities that lead nowhere, and dreams that no longer match who you're becoming. But perhaps most remarkably, this wise detachment creates something that others find absolutely irresistible. It generates a kind of presence that draws people like a magnet. In the ancient kingdom of Magadha, there lived a humble monk named Kassapa who had taken a vow of silence that lasted for 7 years. He owned nothing but his simple robes and begging bowl, spoke to no one except when absolutely necessary, and lived in complete solitude in a small cave outside the city. By all appearances, he was just another forgotten hermit seeking personal enlightenment. Yet something extraordinary began happening around Kassapa that no one could explain. People started gravitating toward his cave without knowing why. Merchants would detour from their trade routes just to sit quietly near where he meditated. Mothers brought their sick children to rest in his presence. Even wild animals seemed drawn to the peaceful energy that surrounded him. One day, a wealthy nobleman arrived at the cave in great distress. His young son had been mute since birth, and no physician or healer had been able to help. The nobleman had heard whispers about the silent monk, whose very presence seemed to heal troubled hearts. Desperate, he brought his child to Kassapa's cave. Kassapa never spoke to the boy, never performed any ritual or ceremony. He simply sat in meditation while the child played quietly nearby. After 3 days, something miraculous occurred. The boy spoke his first words, not to his father or anyone else, but as if responding to something only he could hear in the profound silence that surrounded the monk. When the astonished father asked Kassapa how this healing was possible, the monk broke his 7-year silence with words that reveal the seventh secret of good karma. He said, "When the heart becomes completely still, it reflects truth like a perfect mirror. People are not drawn to what I say or do, they are drawn to what I have become. In the stillness of a pure heart, others recognize their own deepest nature." Word of this healing spread throughout the kingdom, but Kassapa never sought fame or followers. He simply returned to his silent meditation. Yet people continued to come, not for miracles or teachings, but simply to be in his presence. Many later said that sitting near him was the most peaceful experience of their lives, though they couldn't explain why. This reveals the seventh extraordinary gift that only people with good karma possess: a magnetic presence that attracts souls, not through charm or charisma, but through the pure energy of a consciousness that has been cleansed by right living. But this magnetism is completely different from what most people think of as attractiveness. It's not about being beautiful, wealthy, famous, or even particularly interesting. People with good karma become magnetic because their energy field has been purified of the static and interference that comes from harmful actions. Think about the most magnetic person you've ever met. I'm not talking about someone who was trying to impress you or win your approval. I mean someone whose presence made you feel genuinely peaceful, someone around whom you naturally became your best self, someone who made you feel seen and understood without saying much at all. That person had good karma. Their inner world was so clean, so free from the chaos of guilt, deception, and selfish agenda that being around them felt like finding an oasis in a desert. They weren't performing or pretending. They had simply become the kind of person that souls naturally recognize and trust. The Buddhist masters understood that consciousness is contagious. When you spend time with someone whose mind is agitated, fearful, or filled with ill will, you absorb some of that energy. But when you're near someone whose consciousness has been purified through right living, you naturally feel more peaceful, more centered, more connected to your own highest nature. This happens because people with good karma have stopped competing with life. They're not trying to prove anything, win anything, or take anything from others. Their energy doesn't push or pull or demand. It simply is. And in that pure being, others recognize something they desperately long for in themselves. You've probably experienced this magnetism in reverse as well. You've met people who seemed attractive on the surface, but something about their energy felt draining or unsettling. Despite their efforts to be charming, you found yourself wanting to get away from them. That's the energy of unclear karma, consciousness that's been contaminated by actions that contradict their true nature. People with good karma don't need to work at being magnetic. They become irresistible simply by becoming authentic. When there's no gap between who they are and how they act, when their inner and outer lives are perfectly aligned, they radiate an integrity that others find absolutely compelling. But perhaps most remarkably, this magnetic presence doesn't create dependency or neediness in others. Instead, it awakens something that naturally leads to the eighth secret. In the mountains of ancient Nepal, there lived a monk named Ananda who had taken vows of simplicity and owned virtually nothing. His entire worldly possessions consisted of 3 robes, 1 begging bowl, a needle for mending, and a razor for shaving his head. By any material measure, he was among the poorest people in his region. Yet something remarkable surrounded Ananda that defied all logic about wealth and poverty. Every morning, Ananda would walk through the villages with his begging bowl, accepting whatever food was offered. But instead of keeping everything for himself, he had developed an unusual practice. Whenever he encountered someone hungrier than himself, which was often, he would give them most of his meal and continue with whatever remained. The villagers began to notice something extraordinary. Despite giving away most of his food every day, Ananda never seemed to lack for nourishment. His bowl was always somehow filled again by generous donors who were moved by his selfless behavior. More mysteriously, his simple presence seemed to bring abundance to others as well. Families who fed Ananda reported that their own food supplies lasted longer than expected. Farmers who shared their rice with him found their harvests more bountiful than previous years. Even merchants who offered him simple fruits noticed their businesses thriving in ways they had never experienced before. One day, a wealthy trader who had lost his fortune through bad investments approached Ananda in desperation. The man had heard rumors about the monk's unusual relationship with abundance and hoped for some secret technique to restore his wealth. When he explained his situation, Ananda shared a teaching that reveals the 8th secret of good karma. Ananda said, "You seek abundance like a man digging deeper and deeper wells while ignoring the spring at his feet. True wealth is not what you accumulate, but what flows through you. When you become a clear channel for generosity, abundance moves through your life like water through an open riverbed. But when you grasp and hoard, you become like a dam that stops the flow and creates scarcity for yourself and others." The trader was skeptical, but desperate enough to try Ananda's approach. He began giving away what little he had left to those in greater need. Within months, business opportunities appeared that restored his fortune beyond his previous wealth. More importantly, he discovered something he had never experienced before: genuine contentment that didn't depend on how much he owned. This is the 8th profound gift that only people with good karma experience: abundance without obsession. They live with enough, not because they have everything they want, but because they've learned to want what they have. Their needs are met through grace rather than grasping, through flow rather than force. But this abundance isn't just about money or material possessions. People with good karma experience abundance in every area of life. They have enough love, enough peace, enough joy, enough meaning. Not because their external circumstances are perfect, but because their inner relationship with life has been transformed. Think about your own relationship with abundance right now. Do you wake up feeling grateful for what you have or anxious about what you lack? When unexpected expenses arise, do you trust that resources will appear, or do you panic about scarcity? Do you give freely when you have the opportunity, or do you hoard out of fear that there won't be enough? The Buddhist masters understood something that modern economics completely misses. Abundance is not a quantity, it's a quality of consciousness. When your karma is clean, when you've lived with generosity and trust, you develop what they called the abundance mindset. You operate from sufficiency rather than scarcity, from trust rather than fear. This creates a remarkable cycle. Because you're not desperate or grasping, you make better decisions about money and resources. Because you give freely when you have the opportunity, you create goodwill that returns to support you in unexpected ways. Because you're grateful for what you have, you attract more reasons to be grateful. People with good karma understand that true security doesn't come from accumulating wealth, but from becoming the kind of person that life naturally supports. They focus on developing their character, their skills, their relationships, their service to others. The material abundance that follows is simply a natural result of this inner development. The ancient texts are filled with stories of generous people who never lacked for anything they truly needed. Monks who gave away their food and always found their bowls refilled. Teachers who served freely and discovered their basic needs mysteriously met. Healers who asked for no payment yet lived in simple comfort. But perhaps most remarkably, this abundance without obsession creates the inner freedom necessary for the highest gift of good karma, something that transcends all material concerns. In the ancient kingdom of Kapilavastu, there lived a monk named Upali who had endured more suffering than most people could imagine. As a young man, he had lost his entire family to plague, watched his village burn in war, and spent years as a refugee with nothing but the clothes on his back. When he finally found his way to a Buddhist monastery, many expected him to be broken, bitter, or at least deeply scarred by his tragic experiences. Instead, something inexplicable surrounded Upali. Despite having every reason to be miserable, he radiated a joy so profound and constant that it became legendary throughout the region. Visitors to the monastery would seek him out, not for his wisdom or teachings, but simply to experience the mysterious happiness that seemed to flow from him like light from a flame. One day, a wealthy merchant arrived at the monastery in deep depression. Despite having accumulated vast riches, a loving family, and social status that others envied, he felt empty and hopeless inside. When he met Upali working cheerfully in the monastery garden, the merchant couldn't contain his bewilderment. The merchant demanded, "How can you be so happy? You have nothing, you've lost everything, you own nothing but these simple robes. I have wealth beyond measure, yet I wake up every day feeling like my life is meaningless. What secret knowledge do you possess that I lack?" Upali stopped his gardening, looked at the merchant with eyes that sparkled with inexplicable delight, and shared a teaching that reveals the 9th secret of good karma. He said, "You seek joy in the wrong direction, my friend. You look for it in possessions, achievements, and circumstances, like a man searching for the sun in his shadow. Joy is not something you acquire or earn. It is what remains when you stop carrying what was never yours to carry." The merchant pressed further, demanding to know what Upali meant. The monk continued, "I carry no guilt from actions that betrayed my true nature. I harbor no resentment toward life for the suffering it brought me. I waste no energy wishing the past were different or fearing that the future will disappoint me. When you put down these heavy burdens that most people carry their entire lives, what remains is the natural joy of simply being alive." The merchant left that day with a teaching that would transform his understanding of happiness forever. Joy without reason, he learned, wasn't the absence of problems, but the presence of inner freedom. It wasn't about having everything go your way, but about being at peace with whatever way things went. This is the 9th extraordinary gift that only people with good karma experience. Joy that needs no external justification, happiness that doesn't depend on circumstances, a deep contentment that bubbles up from within regardless of what's happening in the outer world. But this joy is completely different from pleasure or excitement. Pleasure comes from getting what you want. Excitement comes from anticipating good things. This deeper joy comes from something far more profound. It comes from the soul's recognition that it is finally free. Think about the happiest moments of your life. Were they always connected to external achievements or acquisitions? Or have there been times when you felt inexplicably joyful for no reason you could name? Maybe it was watching a sunset, holding a sleeping child, or simply sitting quietly and feeling grateful to be alive. Those moments of causeless joy reveal what's naturally present when good karma clears away everything that obscures it. People with good karma experience this joy because their inner world has been cleansed of the three great joy killers that plague most human beings. First, guilt and regret about past actions. Second, resentment and bitterness about how they've been treated. Third, anxiety and fear about future outcomes. When these heavy burdens are lifted through right living and inner purification, what remains is the soul's natural state. The Buddha taught that joy is not something you create or achieve. It's something you uncover by removing everything that covers it. This doesn't mean people with good karma never face difficulties or feel sad when appropriate. But underneath whatever temporary emotions they experience, there's always this unshakable foundation of joy. It's like a deep underground spring that continues flowing regardless of the weather on the surface. The ancient masters understood that this causeless joy is actually the most reliable indicator of spiritual development. Anyone can be happy when things go well, but only those who have truly purified their karma can maintain inner joy when facing loss, disappointment, or uncertainty. Modern psychology has begun to recognize what the Buddhist teachings have always known. True happiness comes not from external circumstances, but from internal freedom. When you're not constantly defending past mistakes, nursing old wounds, or desperately trying to control outcomes, enormous energy becomes available for simple appreciation of existence itself. But this profound joy points to something even deeper, the ultimate secret that encompasses all the others. In the final years of the Buddha's life, there came to him a monk named Mahakassapa who had spent decades studying under various masters throughout India. Mahakassapa was renowned for his scholarship, his discipline, and his apparent spiritual attainments. Yet something troubled him deeply. Despite all his knowledge and practice, he felt like he was still pretending to be enlightened rather than actually being enlightened. When Mahakassapa met the Buddha, he expected to receive profound teachings, secret practices, or advanced meditation techniques. Instead, the Buddha did something that completely transformed his understanding of spiritual development. The Buddha simply sat in perfect stillness and looked at Mahakassapa with eyes that reflected back exactly what the monk was, without judgment, without trying to change anything, without even the slightest distortion. In that moment of being perfectly seen, Mahakassapa realized something that shattered all his spiritual concepts. He understood that he had been trying to become something special rather than simply being authentic. He had been performing enlightenment rather than living it. He had been seeking to impress others with his spiritual achievements rather than allowing his true nature to shine through without effort. The Buddha spoke only once during this encounter, sharing words that reveal the 10th and most profound secret of good karma. He said, "You have spent years trying to become a perfect mirror, polishing and perfecting your reflection. But you are not the mirror, my friend. You are the truth that the mirror reflects. When you stop trying to be anything other than what you are, you become a perfect mirror for others to see their own true nature." From that day forward, Mahikassapa became known as the Buddha's most authentic disciple, not because he performed great miracles or delivered brilliant teachings, but because he had learned to live as a perfect reflection of truth. When people met him, they saw themselves clearly, often for the first time in their lives. This is the 10th and ultimate gift that only people with the highest good karma experience. They become living mirrors of truth, not because they're perfect, but because they've stopped pretending to be anything other than what they are. Their presence reveals reality without distortion, judgment, or agenda. People with this level of good karma have transcended the need to maintain any false image. They're not trying to impress anyone, win approval, or hide their imperfections. This complete authenticity creates something extraordinary. Others feel safe to be real around them because there's no pretense to maintain, no performance to match. Think about the most authentic person you've ever known. When you were with them, did you feel like you could drop all your masks and just be yourself? Did their presence somehow give you permission to stop pretending and start being real? That person had achieved what Mahikassapa discovered. They had become a clear mirror. This authenticity isn't the same as being careless with your words or actions. People with good karma are deeply considerate of how their behavior affects others. But their consideration comes from genuine care, not from trying to manipulate how others see them. They speak truthfully not to prove their honesty, but because lying feels foreign to their nature. The Buddha taught that this mirror-like quality is the culmination of all spiritual development. When your karma becomes completely pure, you naturally reflect truth in every interaction. You don't have to work at being wise, compassionate, or peaceful. These qualities flow through you effortlessly because there's nothing left inside you to distort them. Living as a mirror of truth means that your outer life perfectly matches your inner reality. There's no gap between who you are when you're alone and who you are with others. There's no difference between what you think privately and what you express publicly. This integration creates a power that others find absolutely compelling. But perhaps most remarkably, when you become a clear mirror for others, you help them see possibilities in themselves they never knew existed. Your authenticity gives them permission to drop their own pretenses. Your peace shows them that inner calm is possible. Your joy reminds them of their own capacity for happiness. This is why people with the highest good karma often become natural teachers, healers, and leaders without ever seeking these roles. Others are drawn to them not for what they know, but for who they've become. They inspire transformation simply by being themselves completely. The ancient texts tell us that when the Buddha achieved this mirror-like state, he could reflect back to each person exactly what they needed to see for their own awakening. This is the ultimate expression of good karma, becoming so clear that you serve as a perfect reflection of truth for everyone you meet. You've now discovered the 10 profound secrets that only people with good karma experience. Peace in solitude, help from unexpected sources, inner guidance that never fails, graceful transitions through life's changes, unshakable trust in the process, wise detachment from what doesn't serve, magnetic presence that attracts souls, abundance without obsession, joy that needs no reason, and ultimately living as a perfect mirror of truth. But knowledge alone changes nothing. These secrets only transform your life when you begin living them. The path to good karma isn't mysterious or complicated. It starts with a simple commitment to align your actions with your deepest values, to speak truthfully even when lies would be easier, to treat others with genuine kindness regardless of how they treat you. Every choice you make from this moment forward is either building good karma or depleting it. Every word you speak either adds to your inner peace or creates more chaos. Every action you take either moves you closer to these 10 gifts or further away from them. Start today. Start with the next person you meet. Start with the next decision you face. Start with the next words you speak. The ancient masters taught that transformation begins not with grand gestures, but with simple moments of choosing truth over deception, kindness over cruelty, generosity over selfishness. If this video has opened your eyes to possibilities you hadn't seen before, if these ancient teachings have stirred something deep within you, then your journey toward good karma has already begun. Subscribe to Echoes of Dharma for more wisdom from the Buddhist masters. Share this video with someone who needs to hear these truths, and most importantly, begin living these secrets starting right now. Your future self is watching. The universe is listening. Life is waiting to reflect back to you the beauty of who you're truly capable of becoming. The choice, as always, is yours.